ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Christopher Skase, young, handsome entrepreneur. He finds epic success in the 80s.
He came with that cowboy energy. He was doing big things.
Skase becomes a media mogul.
He outbid the legendary Rupert Murdoch.
His empire teeters, but he outfoxes them all. I'm Mark Humphreys. To binge the full series now, search for ABC Rewind and look for Skase, Fall of a Tycoon on the ABC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, it's Sam here. Just a quick reminder before we delve into today's episode that we have a listener survey running right now, and we would love to hear from you about how you're finding the show. You can find it in our show notes or on the website. Just search for ABC News Daily. It's a dark cloud that's hovered over Sussan Ley's Liberal Party leadership since the beginning. Should she keep or dump the 2050 ambition for net zero? Well, now the party she's in coalition with, the Nationals, have officially canned it. The pressure is on for the Liberal leader to do the same. Today, Chief Political Correspondent at The Conversation, Michelle Grattan, on the history of the Coalition's climate policy and whether Australian voters are willing to give up on the key emission reduction target. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Michelle, apparently they call these last few sitting weeks of Parliament the killing season because that's when leaders are rolled. Is that true?
Well, it is true because it has happened a number of times before. And of course, the last thing we would have expected when Sussan Ley was chosen as leader would be that there would be such speculation at the moment.
A leader under siege. Is the coalition at risk of another split over net zero?
The Federal Coalition is tearing itself apart over the net zero climate policy of cutting carbon dioxide emissions to a small amount by 2050.
I, a little while ago, informed the opposition leader, Sussan Ley, of the National Party's decision to scrap net zero by 2050.
Sussan Ley is confident she won't be killed before Christmas, and I think that is a reasonable assumption.
I'm completely confident, and I have a smile on my face as I answer this because I know that the media and commentary does get a little bit excited.
But nevertheless, it's just a mark of her present precarious predicament.
Well, let's now step back, Michelle, for a moment to get a sense of the Coalition's history on net zero and climate change. It has been led by some climate change sceptics. I mean, Tony Abbott, for one, he once said that climate change was absolute crap.
It was, if you like, a bit of spur-of-the-moment hyperbole. But B, I was talking about the arguments on climate change, in particular the argument that the science is settled. Now, I don't believe that the science is settled.
I think he also said that he was a weather vane. In other words, that he might doubt the science, but if circumstances demanded it, he was willing to go along with it. And I think what you've seen over very many years is that the Conservative side of politics has been in itself broadly a weather vane. It's changed its position. It's removed one leader, Malcolm Turnbull, twice, once in opposition, once in government, over the issue of climate change, various aspects of it. We had Scott Morrison bringing a lump of coal into the Parliament.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
The Treasurer knows the rule on crops.
It's coal.
We also had Scott Morrison doing that rather extraordinary deal in 2021 when he wanted to go to the Glasgow conference with a commitment on net zero by 2050, doing a deal with the Nationals, with Barnaby Joyce, who's of course been leading this current push away from net zero, to embrace net zero, and that was in exchange for a great deal of money for infrastructure for the Nationals. And one extraordinary twist on that deal was that Barnaby Joyce did it with Scott Morrison, but at the same time personally made it clear he didn't believe in it.
Our plan is a fair plan. It's a practical plan. It's a responsible plan. Our plan for net zero by 2050 is the plan that I believe Australians want.
100% I'm on board with the goal of 2050 zero emissions. What more do you want?
So what changed Scott Morrison's mind? Just remind me, because he, as you say, he came into the parliament with a lump of coal, and then in 2021 he agreed to adopt this net zero target. So why did he do that, do you think?
Politics, politics, politics. I think it's as simple as that. And, of course, the icing on the cake is that now he's moved away from his own position, which he fought so hard to get adopted in 2021, and is saying, well, now net zero by 2050 is not relevant. In other words, he's endorsing those who say the coalition needs to move away from it.
All right, so Michelle, the coalition, including the Nationals, of course, had this net zero by 2050 position, which it adopted in 2021. But now, of course, they're circling back. The Nationals leader, David Littleproud, he dumped that target on the weekend. So just tell me, what was he saying then, and what was the reason behind this?
The Nationals have always been much more sceptical on climate change action than the Liberals, and that's even taking into account that 2021 deal. Now, in terms of David Littleproud, he's essentially saying this is costing the Australian economy and the Australian consumer through electricity prices too much.
What we want to do is we believe that there's a cheaper, better, fairer way to reduce emissions, to address climate change, and to make sure that we can address affordability of energy for households and for business. What we're saying is that you should put all the solutions on the table, including nuclear.
I think that he feels the need, whatever he might think personally, goodness knows exactly where he is personally on the issue now, but he feels the need to go along with what became a very strong tide within the Nationals in the last few months. And of course that was pushed not only by Barnaby Joyce, who's now sort of half in, half out, but also Matt Canavan, who's co-chaired the Nationals Review of Policy and who's absolutely passionate against net zero.
Yeah, Barnaby Joyce, he argues that net zero is tearing regional Australia apart.
The hurt that my electorate is going through, first and foremost, because of the ridiculous policy, which is net zero, which will have no effect on the weather, but is completely desecrating our landscape, dividing our communities, impoverishing poor people, deindustrialising our nation. And
what does he mean by that, Michelle?
One issue in regional Australia has been, of course, these the construction of these transition lines and the wind farms and solar farms. The transition lines have been particularly controversial in regional areas. They're enormous. They've affected many, many communities and farming properties, and they've also divided communities because people who accept them going across their properties are getting large sums of money, and others who oppose them feel that these lines are being constructed there against their will, and that communities are being divided by essentially bribes in many cases.
All right. Well, this, of course, Michelle, puts the Liberal Party leader, Sussan Ley, as you say, in a pretty tricky position because she doesn't want the Liberal Party to split from the Nationals. She's in a really tough spot, I would say.
We do need to get this right, and we need Liberal Party policy to come out of our party room.
Do you personally believe in net zero carbon emissions by 2050?
I've always said we cannot have net zero at any cost. I said that on day one of my leadership, and I'll say it 6 months later. And
the Liberal Party itself has its composition in terms of those who support and oppose net zero has changed. A few months ago, there would be, I think, a clear majority in favour of retaining net zero. Now it seems, as we speak today, that has shifted to a majority thinking it does need to be dumped. So you have now a minority, the hardcore moderates, who are fighting back to keep net zero, at least in some form, but the pressure really is against them. Now, where all this ends up, who knows, because there won't be a decision for a week or two within the party.
All right. And as we said, this is a lot about the leadership of Sussan Ley. She thinks she's safe, as we said earlier, but whichever way she jumps, Michelle, if she keeps the target or if she gets rid of it, can she actually survive? Because, as you say, there are moderates in the party that do not want to see this.
The fact that her leadership is under such pressure could stay the hand of those moderates because they know that if they go too far and Sussan Ley can't survive, then they get Angus Taylor, and they don't want that. But I should say that when we're talking about whether Sussan Ley can survive, we're talking about Christmas. We're not talking about whether she can survive to the next election or even for 12 months. But you wouldn't find more than half a dozen Liberals, and you'd be looking hard for them, who think that Sussan Ley will survive in the longer term, will lead into the next election. They do think she's an interim leader.
All right, well, let's, Michelle, turn now to what this means for voters. Now, the Nationals are pretty sure, aren't they, that they're on a winning ticket in regional Australia by dumping net zero. Do you think they're reading that right?
Well, it's hard to say because I think net zero is divisive in the regions as it is in some other areas. But the Nationals are worried about pressure on their right because recent polls, and most recently the news poll this week, have shown that One Nation has a surge in its vote. In news poll it was up to 15%. That's quite substantial. So they're looking to not particularly make progress in the regions, but to keep the ground they have. They want to make sure that their support is not eroded, and especially that they don't come under more pressure from One Nation.
For the Liberals, it's much trickier though, isn't it? It also has to consider these city seats.
Well, the Liberals obviously went dramatically backwards for the second election, and they are hardly a presence now in urban areas. They need to get voters back, and they do need to win some of those teal seats back. So in all those constituencies, climate change is a big issue, and net zero is a symbol of how serious a party is.
All right, well then tell me, Michelle, how important is it for the Liberal Party to actually deal with this and deal with it quite quickly?
Obviously it's important for it to deal with it quickly, because the longer it goes on, the longer they will be in this absolute chaos, and they recognise that. But a way through it that's going to be satisfactory is very hard to see, because really they can't satisfy the voters they need to satisfy. I guess the best way through it would be a compromise that says net zero is an aspiration rather than making it a target, but a lot of people would be alienated by that. Whatever comes out of that, it's a case of, for Sussan Ley and for the Liberals, trying to minimise the damage rather than maximising the advantages of a new policy.
Michelle Grattan is the Chief Political Correspondent at The Conversation and a Professorial Fellow at the University of Canberra. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed, Cinnamon Nippard and Jessica Wukinov. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Don't forget to jump into our listener survey, which is in the show notes or on our website. Thanks for listening.